Welcome back to the Spiritual Awakening podcast. I am Monica. Please join us for an enlightening podcast on non-duality and the brain science of neuroscience and lasting happiness. We're about to explore cutting-edge research and timeless wisdom on finding true contentment. With us today is Elias Stasinos. Elias, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Monica. I'm thrilled to be here and share some insights from non-duality and neuroscience about finding real happiness and freedom.
Elias, studies show increased grey matter in meditation practitioners.
Not only that, Monica, meditation and spiritual seeking often leads to self-realization and liberation from our ego jail. Yes, Monica. And what if I told you that neuroscience can unlock the mystery of non-duality?
Elias, I understand that neuroscientists have found that meditation is linked to specific brain activity related to self-referential thinking and story-making.
True, Monica. Mindfulness and meditation help slow down these default mode network neural patterns in our brains.
Awesome, Elias. As you mentioned, you hold a doctorate in jurisprudence, and you are practicing law in California. So, how does a legal science-oriented dude like you finally got into this whole non-duality and brain science thing? As you have mentioned, your college degree in psychology related to brain studies helped you become interested in neuroscience that also studies the brain. You learned how the brain works, which resulted in a profound sense of unity and peace in your life.
Well, Monica, it's actually quite a story. A while back, I had this wild Kundalini experience. It was incredible and totally woke me up spiritually. My Kundalini energy just fired up, and it was a massive transformation, even though I didn't fully get it at the time. This Kundalini energy burned through all my negative thought patterns and pretty much erased most of the automatic behaviors most of us have. These reactive behaviors keep us captive to our thinking and behavioral patterns. That is why we are suffering in this life. The Kundalini experience left me feeling super peaceful and happy for months. This triggered my curiosity for the study of the brain. It's crazy how well it fits with what non-duality and neuroscience tell us. From my training in psychology and spiritual knowledge of how the brain works based on my undergraduate degree in psychology, I can only say that it's like my Kundalini awakening messed with my brain's default mode network, brain amygdala, and other parts that usually keep us stuck in ego-driven suffering. It was a very exotic spiritual experience that lasted for months. However, following that super enlightening experience, it took me many years to understand what it was all about. It was only the last few years when I finally understood that it is all about how the ego keeps us in the illusion of who or what we are. I found out that the ego is just an illusion. Eventually, I was self-realized, and I am now able to share this knowledge with others in hope that some will be liberated from this life of suffering, realizing that the self, or my ego, isn't some permanent essential part of me, but just a conditioned thing we've created. That's huge when you're trying to really know yourself and break free.
Wow, Elias, that's a powerful story. It sounds like this experience totally flipped your view of yourself. Can you break down what you mean by the ego being an illusion?
Sure, Monica. The ego thing is pretty mind-bending and not easy to grasp for our usual ego-driven minds. The ego is our consciousness' false identification with the individual concept of ourself in our minds. It is the source of our limited perception and the root of suffering, as it leads us to mistakenly identify with our thoughts, body, and personal experiences, rather than recognizing our true nature as pure consciousness. So, it's cool how Eastern wisdom, like meditation and Western science, can work together to help us understand ourselves and find liberation from the ego and real happiness.
That's fascinating. So if the ego isn't really what we believe we are, what is whatever we are?
Great question. Our true self isn't this ego we've built up over time. It's actually a deeper, more basic awareness that goes beyond our individual identity. It's like this pure, unconditioned consciousness that non-dual traditions talk about as our real essence, beyond the fake self we usually think we are. It is just this simple awareness, the knowing that we exist minus the problems that the mind convinces us that we have.
You mentioned that your Kundalini awakening messed with your brain's default mode network. Can you explain how this network affects our sense of self and happiness?
Absolutely. The default mode network, or DMN, is super involved in creating and maintaining the ego. When it's active, we get all caught up in thinking about ourselves, worrying about stuff, and stressing about the future. All of this makes us feel like we're separate and limited. So, shaking up this neural network is key to breaking down the ego and finding a more stable, content state of awareness.
That makes sense. It seems like understanding the ego and how it works is crucial for happiness. But how do we quiet the ego in the DMN and all its constant chatter?
Great point, Monica. Practices like meditation, mindfulness, and self-inquiry are awesome tools for quieting the ego found in the DMN network of our brains. We need to understand the secret that is not a secret. Our simple awareness of the surroundings, our sense of existence, and generally the knowing that we exist without any thoughts, is what we are. By training ourselves to stay in the present moment, instead of getting caught up in all our mental stories, we can start to break down this idea of a fixed, continuous self. This opens us up to experiencing our natural wholeness and peace beyond the limits of the ego.
That totally makes sense. Now, you mentioned that chasing pleasure through dopamine doesn't lead to lasting happiness. Can you break down the science behind that a bit more? What happens in our brains when we overdo it with pleasurable activities?
Sure thing. When we keep doing things that give us pleasure and release dopamine, our brain starts to adapt. It actually decreases the number of dopamine receptors. This means we need more and more stimulation to get the same level of pleasure. It turns into this nasty cycle of always wanting more and never being satisfied, as our brain's reward system gets hijacked by chasing these temporary highs.
So true happiness comes from somewhere else entirely. You mentioned a few key things like turning off the default mode network and staying present. Can you tell us more about how being present contributes to happiness?
Absolutely, Monica. You know, our brains are kind of weird. They tend to paint future problems in super vivid colors, way more than future good stuff. It's like we're wired to worry. This can make us suffer over things that might never even happen. But here's the cool part. If we can stay grounded in the now, we can dodge this whole trap of future-focused negativity. It's like experiencing life raw, without all the anxious what-ifs clouding our view.
Oh man, that explains why always fretting about tomorrow can be such an energy suck. Got any practical tips for staying in the moment?
For sure, you are already what you are looking for. Just the simple awareness of knowing that you exist, that you are here right now, is all you need to rest upon to be self-realized. Simple stuff like focusing on your breath, tuning into your senses, or getting lost in activities you love, can train your brain to stay anchored in the present. It's like doing mental push-ups. The more you practice bringing your attention back to what's happening right now, the weaker your mind's habit of future tripping becomes.
Love it. Now, you mentioned this idea of one-pointedness of the mind. What's that all about, and how does it lead to happiness and self-realization?
So, in yoga, they talk about this state called ekagrata, or one-pointedness. It's when your mind gets super focused and absorbed in what you're doing right now. It's a lot like what scientists call flow. You know, when you're so into something that you lose track of time. That state is linked to feeling engaged, fulfilled, and just plain good. By practicing this laser-focus attention, we can break free from the scattered, anxious thinking of our ego mind.
Sounds like getting into a flow state can be pretty blissful. Any tips on how we can get more flow in our everyday lives?
Look for activities that hit that sweet spot of being challenging, but not overwhelming, with clear goals and quick feedback. This could be anything from painting to playing sports to diving deep into work you love. The key is finding stuff that grabs all your attention and pulls you into the now, instead of letting your mind wander off into worryland.
Fascinating stuff. So, to wrap it up, what are the big takeaways for our listeners who want to tap into lasting happiness?
Well, the simple way to do that is to let go of the ego, because as it is noted in all the rest of the videos in my YouTube channel, the ego, that is the character you think you are, is not the real you. Watch all my videos, and I promise that you will understand that you are not the character that you think you are. Stay present. Don't get caught up in imaginary future dramas. Practice one-pointedness. Get into that flow state. By getting the science behind these ideas and trying out practices like meditation, you can actually rewire your brain for long-term, unshakable happiness, not just quick hits of pleasure.
And that's all we've got time for today, folks. Don't forget to subscribe for more mind-blowing episodes on brain science and spirituality. Until next time, take care. Created by Elias Stasinos. Go to estasinos.tv for more or stay in this YouTube channel at Nondual 123.